Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Football Insomniac podcast. I'm your host, Colin Watt. First of all, I have to apologise for the delay. Virgin Media have a lot to answer for when I come off this, when I phone them. But what I can't apologise about, what I'm actually delighted about, is the guest that we've got today. And it is none other than Sky Sports' own Anthony Joseph, joining us all the way from London. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, all good, thanks, Colin. Glad your internet's working again. But no, it's a pleasure to be on the show. No, I'm a big fan of it, and I'm really happy to be on.
And just like with Anthony Haggerty last week, I'll send that £20 in the post for saying that, so thanks very much. But no, we're delighted to be live today on YouTube, on Facebook and on Twitter. If you are watching, leave us a like. The channel's at nearly 9,500 subscribers, so we're going really well. And if you have any questions for Anthony, leave them in the comments section. And when we get to it later on, I will go through them and get some of them answered. I'm sure there'll be lots about your journalism career so far. Maybe not so much about being up in the Aberdeen area, working for the Aberdeen newspapers. Probably more about the Sky Sports, but we'll get to that shortly. We are going to discuss the week's football talking points first before we get to that. And we'll also hear who Anthony would have over to his house from the world of football for a dinner. So do get involved. This is an interactive show. Leave your comments and we'll bring them up on the screen. But first of all, let's talk about the European football return. So first of all, the Champions League's back. It was back last night. Two big games. PSG running away with a 4-1 victory in the Nou Camp. Liverpool taking advantage of some of the poor defending to take a 2-0 lead back to Anfield. I mean, it's great to have the European football back. Anthony, what I'm going to get from you is your thoughts on the games this week and who you would tip to go and win the tournament this year. So, first of all, last night's games, what was your takeaway from them?
First of all, it was two big games, especially with Liverpool and Leipzig, and then also Barca PSG with Pochettino in charge of PSG. That was whitewash it turned out to be, but it wasn't looking like that when Messi got the penalty. But Mbappe, again, just showing how much of a world-class player he is with the hat-trick. And Pochettino is a very good manager to have at PSG. I think a lot of English Premier League clubs would have been looking at him. Maybe if the pandemic hadn't happened, he might be at Man United by now. But PSG very lucky to have him. And if you're asking who I might tip to win the Champions League, I would maybe say PSG as an outside bet. But saying that, I know they'll probably get knocked out or something like that in dramatic in the next leg. But Liverpool, a huge win for them because of what's going on in the league. The Champions League is going to have to be their focus. Jurgen Klopp has already conceded the title. He said there's no chance they're going to catch Man City. So the Champions League has got to be the focus for them, and that's a huge win at Leipzig, who are a very good team. With Nagelsmann in charge, so could see them going through, and we'll see who they get in the next round if they go through.
I mean, looking at some of the ties, as you said, Barcelona, PSG, the Neymar derby. Even though he wasn't playing, it was a fantastic result. And you take a look at someone like Kylian Mbappe. He's still very, very young. I think he's only 20 or 21 now, and he's got over 140 career goals. I think for me, he is going to be the one that stands out. You've had this period of Messi and Ronaldo. There's never been anyone really up there to challenge them. But I think Mbappe is a complete different type of player. He's a natural-born goal scorer. And there's only really two of them in the world right now. And I would say that's Mbappe and Haaland at Dortmund. And I think they could be the ones that are the next sort of Ronaldo and Messi. But it goes back to the old school, out and out number 9 striker.
Yeah, and that I think you're right in terms of they're probably the next generation of the Ronaldo and Messi, aren't they? Because there's world class, and then there's Ronaldo and Messi who are just on another level, probably that the world has ever seen in football. And Haaland and Mbappe are getting there, and they at such a young age they're already performing to the levels of maybe just under Ronaldo and Messi, but above the rest of the players who we would consider world class. And who knows, they might even surpass Ronaldo and Messi. That's a scary thought, but we'll see.
So, looking at the games tonight, Porto v Juve, Sevilla v Dortmund, be interested to see how Haaland does. As a journalist down in England, what's the thoughts on Haaland? Is there rumours that he's going to be playing in the Premier League?
There's always rumours of any good player from Europe playing in the Premier League. I think it's just, is he not a Leeds fan?
His dad used to play for Leeds, yeah.
He used to play for Leeds, and I'm sure he's a Leeds United fan as well. That would be some story if he ended up at Leeds of all clubs. A huge club, but you wouldn't really class them in the elite level yet anyway. What kind of fee would he command? If they're talking about 100 million, 120 million for Sancho, what would Haaland cost? What would Dortmund accept? You'd think only like PSG, Man City, Real Madrid maybe could afford him. I don't know how, and he would have to engineer that move as well, because Dortmund aren't going to give up a player of that caliber too easily.
I think, and I might be wrong, I'm sure someone in the comment section will let us know. I'm pretty sure Haaland has a buyout clause in his contract that becomes activated, I think it's this summer or next summer, for about 80-90 million pounds. And when you look at it, 80-90 million pounds to get you the kind of goals that he gets, that can win someone the Champions League, that could win someone the Premier League, and it would pay for itself, I think.
Well, what a bargain that would be, considering the likes of Man United would pay 80 million or whatever for Harry Maguire. So what a bargain that would be to get Haaland at that price.
There's plenty of Harry Maguire bashing on this podcast. I said previously that I think his transfer fee was the first fee that was calculated by square inch of his forehead, because he's not a very good footballer, in my opinion. Some comments. Definitely, I can agree with you. Some comments coming in already. Contuck67 saying, I think it's more than possible for Mbappe to be on a level with Messi and Ronaldo before he retires. I'm not sure. Clarify on that one. I love the picture of Limmy, by the way. Clarify on that one. Is it before Messi and Ronaldo retires, or before Mbappe retires? Because I think definitely he will be on that level. I mean, he's still got another 10, 15 years left in him.
Yeah, definitely. And barring a bad injury, which we obviously don't wish on anyone, he is on course to be at that level and maybe even surpass it.
Yeah, definitely. Looking ahead to next week, because there is games next week as well. Contuck's just saying it was before Mbappe retires, and I think definitely he will. Looking ahead to next week's games, the tie of that round for me is really Atletico Madrid versus Chelsea. Atletico Madrid riding high at the top of La Liga. Chelsea just recently taken over a new manager, 4 wins in a row, starting to come into a bit of form. And for me, I know you said that you fancy PSG. I fancy Atletico to do well this year. I think they would be my outside tip to go on and win the whole tournament. And it really starts with this game against Chelsea. If they get through that, who knows who they could get in the next round.
Yeah, and Chelsea have been impressive since they've had Tuchel in charge. They've gone from 9th in the table to 4th in the matter of weeks. It just shows that I think when you have a manager of that caliber, that kind of class, he will deliver results. That's not bashing Frank Lampard, but I think he was in a job that was maybe too big for him at the stage of that in his career, and I think that's been said quite widely amongst pundits and journalists as well. But that's going to be an interesting game. It's a shame Diego Costa is no longer at Atletico, but because that would have been an interesting battle being back at Chelsea. But I would say that is the tie of the round next week. And Atletico, I could see them doing well in this tournament.
Yeah, I think they definitely have surprised quite a few people this year, especially being so far in front in La Liga. But they've also really recruited well as well. You take a look at it up front, guys like João Phoenix. They've also got Suarez that they picked up for absolutely next to nothing from Barcelona. So they're putting together quite a good team there. One of the kind of interesting talking points out of next week's games as well is Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Man City game. And it came out this week that Gladbach manager Marco Rose is going to be going to Borussia Dortmund next season. Considering that the season has still got quite a bit to go, it's quite a strange move for him to announce his plans, especially when they're still in the Champions League.
Yeah, you don't often see it, especially at that kind of level in the Bundesliga or any of the top leagues. You don't see that kind of announcement so soon, just to say that there's that. But it shows there's clubs there that have that kind of succession planning where they know who they want for the next season. They're still in the Champions League. They're still in the doing well in the league, but they feel there's a change needed, and they've got that succession planning. And getting in Marco Rose, who is already doing well at Borussia Mönchengladbach, it just shows that kind of long-term thinking of clubs at that level.
I think it's maybe something that some teams maybe closer to home could be looking to do in succession planning as well. But I'm sure everyone will have their thoughts on that. So you're going for PSG, I'm going for Atletico Madrid. The one team I think we should all keep an eye on this season in the Champions League is Atalanta. I really think that they could surprise a couple of people. They're up against Real Madrid, and then the games next week been out of form completely this season, Real Madrid. So that could be the shock of the round if they knock them out, in my opinion.
Yeah, they'll be so hit or miss, and they've had a few shockers in the Champions League already. I think they were quite lucky to get through their group stage. But Atalanta would be... It's one of those stories, I guess, like Ajax a few years ago, where you saw them reach the semi-finals. I know Ajax are much bigger club, but it's nice to have a team breaking the mold or an exception to the norm. And it would be good. It'd be amazing if they could beat Real Madrid. Despite Real Madrid's poor form, that would still be some feat.
Definitely. And before we go and take a look at the Europa League, I'm just going to go through some of the comments that are coming through. We've got Joe Porter, who says here that how can Barcelona and Real escape fair play regulations? They're over £1 billion in debt apiece and still go out to spend millions. I think that kind of period of spending millions will probably change this summer. There's been a lot of sort of results coming out in recent weeks to suggest that they can't afford to do things like that. I've seen a thing saying that Barcelona aren't going to play Philip Coutinho for the rest of the season because they can't afford part of his transfer fee. So I think that the balance in football will certainly change over the next few years. Red Flutch coming in here saying if Haaland goes to Man City, it's game over. Definitely. And that would be quite an interesting move, seeing him at Man City. And he also says he thinks they're in for Grealish too. The City have just got that kind of money that they can spend despite the financial fair play because of the sponsorship deals.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the type of owners they've got as well, and what they're how they make their money and how they work it around, like you say, the type of ownership they have. And I would say the only club able to compete like that would be PSG. So I think it's one to watch on where Haaland would go if he goes, because Dortmund are still such a great club to be at and challenge in the Champions League. And I know it was Bayern are going for 9 in a row, aren't they? But still, Dortmund are always up there in the Bundesliga.
Definitely. And Matthew Duffin here, I think, backing up my point, he fancies Atletico and he fancies Moussa Dembele to score the winner in the final. That would be some fairy tale for him. I
would happily lose my PSG shout if there's a demolition in the final with Atletico.
I think we're all supporting Moussa Dembele. So let's take a look at the Europa League, and I'm just going to pull out, obviously it's a round of 32 there, so there's quite a lot of ties. But let's take a look at the ties involving the teams from the UK. We've got Real Sociedad versus Manchester United, also known as the Davy Moyes Derby. Slavia Prague versus Leicester. Wolfsberger versus Spurs. Probably the tie of the round in Benfica versus Arsenal. And also Antwerp versus Rangers. Out of the 5 UK teams that are still left, how many of them do you think will go through?
Oh, good question. 4, I think, will go through. I could see Sociedad maybe upsetting Man United, actually, because they're doing really well in the league at the moment, and they're pushing for Champions League spots. Man United just they're not massively in a title race, but they are close, and they could be within touching. They're the only team maybe that could actually challenge City properly. I don't know. I just try to think whether we'll see what kind of teams they put out as well. How seriously the English teams usually take the latter stages seriously when they play a lot of their kids during the group stage. But Sociedad are a good team, and I think that might be the one where there might be a little upset.
I think for me, I agree with you on 4, but I think it'll be Slavia Prague that could knock out Leicester. You look at Slavia Prague in the group stage; they beat Beersheva, Nice, and Bayer Leverkusen there. So, I mean, Leicester on a good run of form, but I think they might prioritise the league position over the Europa League this season, and I could maybe see them knocking them out. I think Spurs will get past Wolfsberger. Arsenal, Benfica. Now, this is an interesting tie because this has been played at 2 neutral grounds. There's no home advantage for either team there because of the COVID regulations at the minute. So that could be one that causes an upset. And just as Joe Porter comes in to say there, he reckons Benfica will hammer Arsenal. Now, Arsenal's defence this season have been very poor, and Benfica are certainly doing very well in the Portuguese league. So that could be one that causes a big upset as well.
Yeah, and it just shows the craziness of the world we're in and the craziness of football at the moment, doesn't it? That Arsenal can't travel to Portugal and back, and Benfica can't travel to London and back, but they can travel to Athens and play a game, and can travel to Rome as well. It'll be interesting to see those 2 ties here at neutral venues.
So my tips for this out of the 5 games would be Manchester United. I think they'll have enough to beat Real Sociedad. I think Bruno Fernandes shows his class in these games, and they're certainly got enough firepower about them as well. I think Slavia Prague could beat Leicester, Spurs to beat Wolfsberger. On the fence between Benfica and Arsenal, but I'll give it to Arsenal. And I think Rangers will get past Antwerp. I think Rangers could have the easiest tie out the lot, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, going by, Rangers do well in Europe, and they've shown they're a well-drilled side domestically, and they can cut it in Europe. With just look at their performances against Benfica and things like that. They should have enough to beat Antwerp.
So it's early stages, but who would be your outside tip to win the Europa League?
I don't know. Actually, I don't want it to be an English team. I don't like.
And all the English fans have just switched off.
Sorry, guys. It's just a football thing. I really don't know. Actually, who are you tipping?
I'm going against everything you've said. I'm tipping Man United to win it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really don't know. I can't call that. I think it might be an English team because there's so many left in it, but I'd rather not. Yeah, get to the final.
It'll definitely be interesting over the next few days to see who does get through. I think looking at the ties in both the Champions League and the Europa League, I think most of the UK sides will get through, but I'm sure there'll be a couple of upsets. And what was interesting was I didn't actually watch the games last night. I watched them back this morning. I went out a walk last night, and as you walk by people's houses, you can see the televisions in the front room. They were all watching the football, and I think everyone's kind of really tuned in for this. There's a point here from Kevin Graham, and it was something I was actually going to bring up as well. He's saying all these ties should be one-off games. I loved that last season. That was the best part of football coming back last season, was these one-off ties, because there was no sort of holding off, trying to play for the 0-0 and take it back to your own ground. It was really all systems go for 90 minutes.
Yeah, and possibly on a moral and public health level, I would agree with that. The only thing is UEFA wouldn't, because of TV money. They want the TV companies who have got the rights for the Champions League and Europa League want 2 legs of Barca, PSG, of Benfica against Arsenal. And if UEFA were to cut that, then the TV companies would have every right to say, well, give us some of that money back then.
And it's interesting we speak about that, because there has been another thing that's been in the news about European football this week, and it is the potential restructure of the Champions League. So if anyone that hasn't seen it, basically the idea would be that still 32 teams would qualify for the group stage, but instead of playing in groups of 4, it would be a 32-team league where you would only play 10 games, 5 home and 5 away. The games that you play would be based on the pot that you would find yourself in. So back to the pot systems, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're in pot 1, you would play 2 games against another pot 1 side. You would play 3 games against teams in pot 2 and pot 3, and you would play 2 games against a pot 4 side. The idea here being that there would be more games that actually mean something, and more games that get the kind of big ties, like your Man Cities versus your PSGs, your Barcelona, Real Madrids. At the end of it, it would go back to the league system. The top 8 teams would qualify for the next round. Teams in positions 9 to 24 would have playoff ties against each other in the form of 9 playing 24, 10 playing 23, etc. And that was how you'd get your last 16. Now, it seems quite a confusing model, but it's getting a lot of support across Europe. Do you think this is something we could see over the next few years? And is this the first steps towards the European Super League that teams have been trying to get for the last sort of 10, 15 years?
I actually think it's something to try that UEFA would be trying to bat away from a European Super League. This is trying to appease the big clubs, especially, so that they don't form a Super League. So, and especially the Swiss model that we're talking about, where you would have the top teams playing against each other, almost in a similar way to the UEFA Nations League, which came in a few years ago, and everyone was confused about how that works and how that operates. I think now that we've seen it play out twice, well, nearly twice to a finish, we've started to realise the benefits of it and the pros, and there are some cons to it, but it's still good, it's still exciting, and it's better than friendlies. And I guess, sadly, the top and elite clubs maybe see playing again PSG against Anderlecht, they maybe see that as not an appealing tie that they want to be involved in. So, no disrespect to Anderlecht, of course. It's the big clubs. It all comes down to TV money. So basically, in the English Premier League, you've got £1 billion contracts with Sky and BT. The Italian league, the Spanish league, and the German league don't have contracts as good as that, and they want more of that wealth. They want more of that wealth in Europe. That's where they can get it from. Although the Italian league is potentially negotiating a deal quite similar to the English Premier League, but in order to do that, they know that they need to be playing against the top teams. They need more European football. And if the only downside to that would be that something has to give. If there's going to be more European football, so if there's going to be a guaranteed 10 games of European football in this new Champions League, something's got to give. And in England, we're already seeing that the EFL Cup could possibly go, or certainly Premier League teams may not take part in it. In France, I think their League Cup is already gone. I think that's right, and we may see that. But there's also, I always see these things from obviously objectively as a journalist when we're reporting it, but my own personal view, I always see it from a Scottish point of view and how what it means for Scottish football. And I actually think, especially with the introduction of the Europa Conference League and the Europa League narrowing down a bit, more teams playing in Europe can only be a good thing for Scottish football. And if at the moment for next season there's going to be 5 teams playing in Europe, but if there's less games in the Scottish Premiership and more teams playing in Europe, the likes of Aberdeen, Hibs, or teams that you might see in the Europa League, or in Celtic and Rangers, obviously, would be able to attract players by saying there's not just qualifiers in 6 games. There's actually going to be 10 games here that you can, and that should be an aim for Celtic and Rangers to be part of this. And it's a huge selling point to say, look, there's 10 guaranteed games in this Champions League, and you'll be playing in it, and you could attract better players, and that all increases the quality of Scottish football, and it filters down in that way.
Definitely, and you can see the points in the comments coming through both for and against this. one of the kind of big things I've seen when people have been reviewing this is they feel as though it's very franchise-esque, very NFL, where there's so many teams already qualifying. And that asks the question, I don't know what the criteria for qualification would be, whether it would continue to be like the top 4 sides from England automatically qualify, top 4 in Spain, etc. And there's a good point coming in here from Mark, and he's saying, you remember the European Cup when only the champions from each country were involved? And that is the case. It's called the Champions League. But you look at the winners over the last couple of seasons, and in fact, probably right back to probably the year 2000, a lot of the teams that win it aren't the champions of their own country. A lot of teams that make it to the last 4, the final, aren't champions. So it is almost like a European Super League already.
Yeah, but I guess the way it's going, you either jump on with it or you get left behind. That's the thing. And the rich clubs are going to dictate this. And if you're not on board, you will get left behind. And we've possibly seen that with the way some of the changes have been made. Like, for example, the top 4 leagues in Europe getting 4 slots. And it is it's up to the league how they determine. It's up to an association, how they determine who goes into the European spots for each country. Obviously, for something like the Champions League, it is going to be the top 4. But like for example, Scotland used to have a Scottish Cup winner, and other countries have the cup winners going into the Europa League. It's up to the associations, but yeah, they probably, if they did this new format and this new Swiss model, they may maybe look at changing the name from Champions League. I don't know what their plans are for that, but yeah, like you're saying, it's the traditionalists would obviously want to see the champions in the Champions League and playing against each other, but it's not the way that the football world is working at the moment, and you either go along with it and have your say, or you get left behind.
Yeah, I think, as a lot of people say, money talks, and I think that's the way football, sadly, in my opinion, is going. But we'll see what comes out of this. Certainly one to keep an eye on to see what the criteria for qualification is, whether previous winners will have a bit of an extra kind of stimulus towards qualification, if that boosts their coefficient, etc. But one to take an eye on. So thank you to everyone who's joined us so far on the Football Insomniac. We are seeing your comments coming through, and we will bring some of them up on later on when we speak to Anthony about his career so far. One coming through here, actually from Tony Cassidy, who says, via Opta Joe, Kylian Mbappe is only the 3rd player to score a Champions League hat-trick against Barcelona after Tino Asprilla and Andrei Shevchenko. Joining an elite group there, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Great start
there. And last week we were joined actually by Anthony Haggerty, and one of the talking points was the death threats that Mike Dean received following his red card decisions, both of which were rescinded, but he was receiving horrible, horrible threats to both him and his family. And then last night, I actually seen a tweet that you put out, and it talked about a game in the English Championship, English League One, Paul Lambert's. Yeah, Paul Lambert's Ipswich, and the referee there, Darren Drysdale. Now, for anyone that hasn't seen it, definitely go and take a look at it after this. There's a kind of an interesting decision made. I think it was simulation he was getting booked for, the player. Yeah. And he took the player in question here is actually Alan Judge. He took a bit of offence to that and started giving it back to the referee. And the referee, who is actually an RAF sergeant, I found out, actually didn't stand for it. And the two of them went head to head. Now, this is the first time I've ever seen a referee react in such a way. And the response to it online has been very mixed. There's been a lot of people saying it was good for referees to stand up for themselves. Others saying if this was a player, he'd have been sent off. How can you expect someone to respect someone? Yeah, so how can you expect someone to respect someone? That was a bit of a tongue twister. When they're squaring up to each other. How do you think this one's going to play out?
My personal view on it is I see that in terms of how can you enforce the law and expect to be respected for enforcing the law if you are also committing the same kind of acts that we see on a regular basis from players, squaring up to each other, going head to head and nose to nose. It was a very brief head to head, but it did seem like a head touch, and it did seem like it was the referee Darren Drysdale who put the head in. It was a bizarre incident. I mean, anything can happen in the heat of a moment of when you're on the pitch. Who knows what was said as well. That is now up to the FA to say. I was speaking to Ipswich last night, who said they're not making an official complaint, but they are awaiting to see what the next steps are going to be from the FA. The FA, it was obviously like 10 o'clock at night, just said they're aware of the incident and will comment in due course. So but it's one to watch, and yeah, definitely a very different kind of incident that involving referees.
And you've played a bit yourself. You played Sunday League. I don't even think at Sunday League level you've ever seen a referee square up to a player.
No, I haven't. Anyway, I usually stay away from any fights or anything. We've got a few players who like a bit of needle in our team, but I usually stay away from that. But no, I've never seen a referee actually square up to a player himself.
It was so big. It was on the front page of a lot of the kind of big news outlets this morning. So I think unfortunately there will be more that comes out from this. And I think it will be one of those conversations that everyone still in the years to come will want to know exactly what was said between the two of them to have that reaction, similar to Zinedine Zidane and Maserati at the World Cup final. What was actually said? It'll be one of those ones. An Ali McCoy's Neil Lennon situation. People will still be talking about it in years to come.
Well, Lennon, I remember at the time of that, Lennon did say one day he would reveal what was said. But I think since then they've almost been like, no, I'm not saying it. Or it hasn't been asked fairly recently. But yeah, who knows what was said.
I think Neil Lennon also said that if the league got out of control, he would resign. So I'm not sure how much of Neil Lennon's words I can take as gospel right now. But we'll leave that for the Celtic State of Mind show that comes on at 12:30 after this. Now, I can't imagine the reaction to that last night if the fans were in the ground. And this actually is a kind of segue to the next talking point, which is the sort of football roadmap out of COVID. Now, it came out, leaked to the press, that the English government is looking at the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup as potential test events to get fans back into the ground once the numbers are starting to come back down again. Talking about 30% capacity, which is roughly about 30,000 in Wembley. And potential to have fans in for the Euros. Now, we just saw one of the biggest sporting events in the world, the Super Bowl, over in America, and that had 30,000 fans in at it. A lot of them had already been previously vaccinated. Others were put into groups and kept so far apart with cut-out fans in between them. It does ask the question, are we starting to see the return of fans coming up in the future? Can we see the roadmap? Will we get back into the ground soon?
Well, yeah, we will eventually be back in grounds. What I do think is quite dangerous to do is to compare ourselves to other countries and other events. America is not really the example, certainly in the Trump era, was not really the example to follow. I know the Super Bowl has been done differently. Since Biden's been in, obviously they're taking the pandemic a lot more seriously over there. But in terms of the UK, it's just great we can even talk about this now. It definitely seems like in England there's going to be a huge rollout of vaccines next month in March, and once a certain number of people have been vaccinated, you can start to get back to not normal life, but things can start easing their way back to normal. And I think next week they're going to announce how that's going to be and maybe the plan. That's in terms of the country. In terms of football, it would be amazing to get the EFL Cup finals in April, I think it is.
Late April, I think, yeah.
30,000 fans at Wembley for that. That is very promising for things like the Euros coming up this summer. It'll be interesting to see if Scotland has any plans for test events on a larger scale as things go on in perhaps April and May, but to see if they can get fans in at Hampden for the Euros, because that's going to be important. But it's just good we're able to talk about this now, and this is what, like third lockdown or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's almost a whole year we've been in this situation, so to be able to talk about something like 30,000 fans being back in grounds, I think is a positive, and there definitely seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. For if it doesn't happen this season, next season there can be something, and there can be some fans. And
obviously, down south this season, there has been fans in at the games. They were allowed back in for a period. I think it was maybe a couple of months before they went into full lockdown again. We saw crowds like 5,000-6,000 at the Emirates and things like that. Did you manage to sample any of that? What was the kind of response from the fans when that was going on?
I didn't myself, because it was all carefully selected fans who were in close proximity to the stadium and other checks. Obviously, people who would be members of the certain clubs or whatever. And no, I wasn't able to sample it, but yeah, certainly the people who were there were glad to. We spoke to many of them. They were glad to be back in, because it's an escapism for so many people to get away. There's so much doom and gloom in the world, seeing the number of deaths, seeing it surpass 100,000 in the UK. For many people that have been locked down alone, it's a great escape. Football is so much more than just a game in that sense. It's a huge part of people's lives, and you take that away from people, and it has a real detriment to their own well-being. And just in that term, and their mental health and their well-being, it's great to see. It was great to see fans back at the games, but I do think it might have been a bit premature, and but I think that's more due to governments not trying to appease fans, trying to appease sections of society. And there was a lot of things lost in translation about how the UK government was handling the pandemic. So now it seems like we've had a prolonged lockdown since, certainly down in London, it's been almost since November we've been in lockdown, and it seems like there is a clear path out of this now, and let's hope so, for the benefit of everyone and for football, obviously, because I would love nothing more than to be standing in Trafalgar Square on June the 18th in a kilt, drinking before Scotland-England at Wembley. It seems like a bit of a dream still for that to be happening, but I would love nothing more than that.
Oh, I mean, as soon as the penalties were over in the Scotland game, my hotel room in London was booked. So if that does go ahead and we can travel, I'm expecting you to get the first round in. Is that okay?
Yeah. A lot of my mates have booked flights already as well. So yeah, the booked hotels. It would almost make it worth it. Not worth it in terms of the deaths and things like that, obviously. Worth it in terms of what we've endured, what we've had to deal with, to have that party. That party for Scotland fans and for European football.
Definitely. And just if things don't go the way things the kind of roadmap suggests so far, if fans aren't allowed back in for the start of next season, what challenges can you see for clubs in terms of trying to sell season tickets? It must be quite a hard sell, especially not knowing when fans can get back into the grounds.
Yeah, it is. And we've got to applaud every football fan who bought a season ticket in Scotland, because in England they didn't really do that. People stayed with their memberships and things like that, but season tickets weren't bought, certainly not at Premier League level, because they don't need that money, the Premier League clubs. In Scotland is so heavy, the Scottish Premiership especially, so heavily reliant on season ticket holders. And you have to applaud every single fan who has paid money knowing that there was a chance that they would not see a football game live in the stadium, and knowing that they're paying potentially 600 odd quid to watch a stream that is 30 seconds delay. because all streams on the internet are 30 seconds delayed. So
at least.
I get a notification from LiveScore telling me that Celtic have scored before I see it on the laptop. And but yeah, you've got to commend the fans for doing that. But how so many fans will have lost their jobs, so many fans will have had periods out of work on the furlough scheme, things like that. I think it would be really hard for clubs to, if it looks like there's not going to be a return with fans, certainly the first few months of the season, they would have to reduce prices heavily. Mm-hmm. And there has to be some way of compensation. And I think a point was made in one of your other podcasts, and the Celtic State of Mind podcast, is that the clubs, if they were asking for a refund for the fans, or you went to 5 games that you hadn't paid for, they would happily take that money. They would happily ask for that money back. So there should be some level of compensation or increased value, or you get the European games for free, or you get the cup games for free, something like that. There has to be something to make it worthwhile to buy a season ticket for next season.
Yeah, definitely, and it will be an interesting summer to see what lies ahead, especially in terms of fans getting back in. It would be incredible, as you said, to see 30,000 at either the Carabao Cup final or the FA Cup final. It would be incredible, and as you say, you're on the first round in London if we manage to get down for it. So make mine a double, okay? But moving on, potentially, if we are allowed people back into our homes soon, then the potential would be to have people over. Now, you and I both know that if you have someone over in your house, if you have a couple of people over, it's an empty, it's a gaff, it's every other Scottish word. But dinner parties are more accustomed to the London lifestyle. Have you been at a couple of dinner parties since you've moved down there?
I have, yes. Yeah, it is popular. Cheese and wine nights, things like that. It's still not normal for me, but yeah, I've been to a few.
So every time I have a guest on, I do ask them to tell me who would be their dream dinner party, and it's from the world of football. So we're looking for 4 people from the world of football, dead or alive, because we've found this machine, a bit like Cinderella. When the clock strikes 12, they have to come back, but we've got them back for that time period. And they're over in the Joseph household. First of all, and we spoke about this, you have to cook. You can order in, I suppose, but you've got to provide some sort of food. What's on the table?
Well, I'm glad you said you could put order in, because when you said I have to cook, and I was thinking, what can I cook? I was at work as well, too busy to think about what to cook for this imaginary dinner party. Let's say we're ordering a KFC bargain bucket or something like that. Oh, and I'll buy the KFC bargain bucket, and we can all share the chicken.
I wonder if this will have any impact on the people that will be coming into the Joseph household. But who is the first one there? Who's the first one there with a bottle of wine?
First one there, and probably would bring a bottle of wine, is that man behind you, Henrik Larsson, who is my hero and was my hero growing up. I mean, I can't express how much he meant to me growing up, and how much his goals meant for Celtic, and everything that he did for the club and stayed. He could have gone to Man United. He stayed at Celtic and then saw out his 7 years there before going to Barcelona. I've got so much respect for that, because you don't really see that much in the modern game as well. So yeah, it would be Henrik Larsson. I've never had the chance to meet him. I hope to still one day meet him and thank him personally for everything he did. And who knows, he might end up at Celtic in the coaching capacity at some point. But yeah, I would love to meet him and love to have him round for a chicken wing or two.
If anyone hasn't heard or saw last week's Football Insomniac with Anthony Haggerty, he told a fantastic story about Henrik Larsson. He was the journalist at the Daily Record at the time when Henrik left Celtic, and he was tasked with the job of describing all 242 of Henrik's goals for Celtic. He said it was a great job, and he was told by Henrik himself that his son loved it. It was a fantastic keepsake, and he met him at a kind of reception thing at Celtic Park a number of years later, and he signed every single page for him. Whilst looking at the goals, the goal against Rangers, the famous chip over Stefan Klos, and goes, Bert Konterman, and just breaks into laughter. It's a fantastic story. Check it out. It was on last week's podcast. But Henrik Larsson, a complete hero, as you said, behind me here for a good reason. He's in my office because he is a hero. Who would be joining Henrik at the table?
Sticking with the last Celtic man as well I've got here, Tommy Burns, just a true Celtic man, Celtic legend. He got everything about the club because he was part of it. He understood everything about it and just loved to chat about it. I'm very interested in and love the kind of sociology behind clubs that were founded for reasons not only for football. And he's someone who lived it and lived the dream of every Celtic fan, and also understood what it meant to everyone and stayed humble through that. And again, another person I'd sadly never met, but I would have loved to have met him and love to have had him round for dinner.
Any Celtic fans that are watching, if you ever get the chance once this kind of scenario is over, to come to the Greenock Celtic Supporters Club, and within there is a wall which is dedicated as a mural to Tommy Burns. And it's that image of him on his knees with his hands like this after the kind of title celebration. He was one of the nicest men. We had the chance to meet his family at a Tommy Burns supper, and his impact on Scottish football and world football is incredible. You'll never hear a bad word about him. Even guys like Ali McCoist are full of great stories about him, and it said a lot about him that when it was his funeral, you had Walter Smith and Ali McCoist as two of the pallbearers. So he's an incredible man. Who would be joining Tommy and Henrik at the table then?
It would be Pep Guardiola, and just find him a very fascinating character. From wearing his sort of like protest t-shirts or funny t-shirts that he wears sometimes in press conferences, or things that have a big impact as well. I just find him quite a fascinating person, the way he speaks in press conferences. And also, I would love to just talk football with him and just pick his brains on certain aspects of the game and certain aspects of the modern game that he has almost created as well. And I think it'd be a fascinating chat, a fascinating person to have. And perhaps after a few beers, he'd be quite wild as well on the karaoke.
Have you got a karaoke song yourself?
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know. What's yours?
We'll get back to that later on.
You put me on the spot.
Who would be joining Pep, Henrik, and Tommy at the final seat of the table?
The final person would be Juan Mata, who I will not hear it anywhere else. Perhaps Marcus Rashford's going up there in my estimations of that. But Juan Mata is the nicest man in football, and I've been lucky to work with him a couple of times on shoots in my old job. And I will always remember I had very much, when I was first dealing with him, because a lot of players, when we were doing these kind of shoots, it was very like Soccer AM style videos that would be challenges or an eating thing, competition. And a lot of the time you'd be dealing with the agents of players, whereas Juan Mata would just happily give you his number and say, deal with me and we can sort it out. And I had a pinch myself moment where I had a missed call on my phone. I was actually on the toilet. And I got back and I had a missed call from Juan Mata, and it was one of those pinch yourself moments where you've got the World Cup winner calling you, and he is just genuinely the nicest man. He's always got time to do extra things. He's always happy to chat, and certainly when we were on the shoots, and it was great. And yeah, I would invite him round just for that hospitality.
So it does ask the question now that you've said that: Who is the most famous person in your phone book?
Oh, I don't know. It might actually be him. It might be him, I think. I don't know. I'd have to like that. Yeah, maybe him.
So joining Juan at the table is Henrik Larsson, Tommy Burns, Pep Guardiola, and it is a KFC bargain bucket. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that the stories and the kind of laughter would probably get over the fact that it's KFC they're being served. The chicken might still be lying at the end of the night.
I'll be eating it.
But yeah, it's fantastic. If you do have your own dream dinner party, leave it in the comments and we'll bring it up. Although I do have to ask you this. Daniel Skeen has come in saying Tony's karaoke song is Walking in the Air.
That is
I
true.
heard a live rendition myself.
Every Christmas I used to send, well, I still do, send voice notes to my mates. Daniel Skeen is one of my closest mates. And I would send a voice note of me trying to hit the high notes of Walking in the Air. But the Iron Brew version, which we all know and love. Because it's not...
Oh, brilliant.
We've released that advert.
Daniel, if you ever want that to hit the press, send it over to us. We'll put it out. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. And KMX Sweet 44 coming in, just saying, God bless Tommy Burns. Exactly. So we'll move on now and discuss a bit about your career. Obviously, a lot of people know you from Sky Sports, breaking a lot of exclusives. And we've had quite a few questions that have come in about your time at Sky Sports. But first of all, how did you start your journalism journey? Where did it all begin?
Well, basically starting from school. So I was doing work experience at my local paper in Aberdeen, the Evening Express, in my school holidays. And as much as I'd love to set a good example for people doing their hires and things like that, I actually failed higher English. And that's all I needed at 6 year at school. But I was mucking about. I was doing like football coaching badges, in charge of the first year football team. I was mucking about. So, but there's still a pathway, and probably not the traditional one now, but perhaps more old school, the way I got in. So I did a year at Telford College, and sorry, I've just got a notification. No, click that. And a year at college, and at Telford College in Edinburgh, and that got me straight into second year at uni in Aberdeen. But I was there for 2 months, and an opportunity came up at the Evening Express in Aberdeen as a trainee football journalist, which I took at uni. So I'm 29, but I've been in journalism 11 years full time now. Had 5 amazing years learning my trade in Aberdeen. I was lucky enough to do news as well as sport, and then do online stuff, which got me a job at the Mail Online in London for all my sins, perhaps. Certainly not they don't align with my political views, but it was a great learning of one of the world's biggest news websites, and certainly I learned probably the most I've learned in journalism at Mail Online, and how they do things, and how while you don't have to copy their stance on editorially, the way they do things is spot on, and they've got a great business model there, and one I think many places are trying to replicate. But I then left Mail Online after 3 years and went to Kika Media, which was like a new media kind of video production company, and we did stuff Chinese and Japanese mobile networks. It was all promotional stuff, so we did stuff for like Tag Heuer watches, but with Man United players testing out the new thing that shows your golf drive, or Juan Mata doing an eating challenge, like things like that. So it was very like Soccer AM style videos for the Chinese and Japanese mobile network. So that helped me build up a lot of contacts as well, because you're dealing with agents and sometimes players themselves. And obviously at Sky, it's helped me out feeding back into my Scottish contacts, especially for transfer windows. So yeah, I started at Sky last March, just before the lockdown. So I was onboarded remotely pretty much. Well, it's been great fun. And my dream when I was young, from 11, 12, I wanted to work at Sky Sports, and so I do sometimes pinch myself that I'm there. I don't take it for granted. I do realise that I'm in a privileged job to be able to talk and work and find out the stories that in football. And yeah, I never take it for granted, because I do realise it's a very lucky thing to be in.
And obviously, you've spoke about this before, coming from the BAME background and getting into journalism. It's not something that we see very often. And for a long time, there hasn't been that representation in there. Do you think that's starting to change now? Are you seeing more BAME journalists being taken on into more high-profile roles?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex issue as to why that hasn't been the case and why it's starting to be. It's obviously great that it's a hot topic of discussion, and it's on the agenda, and it has been on the agenda for nearly a year constantly. It's the first time I've seen it like that, and in terms of fighting racism and things like that. It used to just be before, where you'd have a show racism the red card month or show racism the red card week, and then you'd forget about it. In terms of the national narrative, it would be forgotten about. People like me would never forget about it, because we deal with it on an everyday basis. But this is the first prolonged campaigns from the media, from politicians, from campaigners, lobbyists, of we need to do something about racism. And as much as there hasn't been major change, I wouldn't expect major change to happen so soon. But as long as we can keep that narrative going and never drop it, it always comes up in conversation. It's always forefront. And if people think it's becoming stale, like taking the knee, it almost reinforces. Some people think taking the knee has become stale, or the message has been lost. But it almost reinforces, for me, the reason why you should keep doing it. Because in a few months' time, when fans are back at games, you'll have, if players are taking the knee, you'll have a kid asking their mum or dad, well, what are they doing there? And then that message gets relayed, and then that leads to progression in society, if you know what I mean. Because it starts from a young age, and racism starts from a young age, and it's in terms of if kids are seeing that live at a game and asking their parents why these people are doing that, and you're saying it's against racism, they'll be intrigued. They'll be intrigued with it, or they'll try and copy their players doing it, or copy their stars doing it. And the message stays and the narrative stays. So despite it not always being a major story, it is still there, if you know what I mean.
No, definitely. So let's talk about something which is almost not really spoken about in media, and it's about what teams journalists support. Now, there's a couple of questions that's come in about this, and Fraser Ogilvie brings one up here saying, does Anthony believe there's such a thing as a biased journalist in the media world? Now, can I ask the question? I mean, a lot of times you see journalists saying, oh, I'm a St Mirren fan, oh, I'm an Aberdeen fan, oh, I'm a Ross County fan. But there's very few that actually come out and say, I'm a Celtic fan, I'm a Rangers fan. And what has been the way you were kind of brought to Celtics fans' attention was you admitted quite openly you're a Celtic fan, you're working in the media. Is there a sort of like a wall that needs to be broken down there for journalists to come out and say, by the way, I support one of the big two teams?
Definitely. And it's the only way we can properly progress, because you look at the media, and Tony Haggerty, obviously an open Celtic fan you had last week. It's very rare for a journalist who's working in Scotland to admit that. And I can sort of understand that. And even when I was in Aberdeen, on my Twitter and things like that, no, I wasn't openly a Celtic fan. Obviously, Aberdeen's quite a small place, so people knew. But since I moved to London, I was like, I don't care now. It's a huge part of who I am. Being a Celtic fan is a huge part of my life. And to hide that is hiding part of me. So I don't see the issue with it. I can almost see why people don't, because the abuse, if I was living in Glasgow, for example, the abuse I would receive maybe just being recognised in the street if I was working in Glasgow and reporting on Celtic and Rangers constantly. I can maybe hide from that being in London, but online you can't hide from it. And I'm open about being a Celtic fan, and I think to progress, I think I would encourage more journalists to do so if they are a Celtic or Rangers fan. If they want to, they don't have to disclose it if they don't want to, but certainly don't hide who you are. Be yourself online and be open and admit it. But that doesn't take away my objectivity. When I'm reporting on something as a journalist, I'm reporting it objectively, whether that's talking about Rangers or Celtic. But when I'm expressing my opinion, I'm expressing my personal opinion. But that is completely different to actually reporting the news or reporting something that might be critical of Celtic or reporting something that might be in praise of Rangers. But yeah, I'm happy with people knowing who I support because it's a huge part of my life. But I think it's definitely a wall that could be broken down if more were to be open about it.
We're just going back to some of the watchers and listeners' questions. Tony Cassidy comes in saying, how does AJ get on? AJ, I mean, that's a great... You've been compared to Anthony Joshua already. How do you get on with Charles Patterson and Jim White, and who's your favourite football commentator on Sky?
I get on with them fine. They're colleagues, they're workmates. So, obviously, Charles is up in Glasgow and work with him regularly, constantly on the phone or text about certain things and stories. And Jim White was in last night. We get on fine. We know our allegiances there, but we just have a good laugh about it. We know we have a good chat, an in-depth chat about football in general and Scottish football especially. But yeah, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Favourite commentator on Sky, and if it's not Roy Keane, why?
Yeah, well, Roy Keane in terms of pundit, and also Micah Richards is just for that infectious laugh. I mean,
brilliant.
It's great anytime he's in, and yeah, probably Roy Keane or Micah Richards.
The kind of the stuff that was leaked out about Micah Richards showing Roy Keane his dancing on FIFA.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. A question coming in here from Lewis Laird. How hectic can it be to work during some of these transfer windows? And there was another question that actually came in. I'm still trying to scroll to find it. What has been your biggest exclusive that you've had in your time at Sky?
In terms of transfers, probably Albion Ayeti signing for Celtic. I mean, I think I was the first to break that Celtic were interested in him and followed it closely due to having worked with him previously on a shoot in my old job. And so, yeah, it was probably that, and just in terms of following all those little updates, because I think he was due to be booked in for a medical and then had second thoughts and went on holiday, and then Lennon was the one that saved the deal in the end a few weeks later, and he finally arrived and signed. During the transfer window, it is extremely hectic, and so when the last two transfer windows have been the news editor for the transfer desk, and you've basically got to be aware of absolutely every transfer going on and coming in from reporters and the stuff that you're also doing yourself. And it's a 24-hour job, because my girlfriend gets annoyed because I was during the transfer window, I'm always on my phone, and she's like, why? And I was like, this is important, we need to get this over the line or something like that. And it's it can be frustrating for her, but yeah, it takes its toll. So after the windows, you'll find our main transfer reporters like Darmish, Cave, Brian will all take a week off or 2 weeks off, whatever, afterwards, because it takes its toll for a whole month especially. You're just constantly on it and aware, and mental. And the fact that sometimes we're working from home as well, it can be difficult. So yeah, it definitely takes its toll.
And Lewis just comes back to say Anthony's openness about his support for Celtic is definitely an inspiration for a student journalist and a Celtic fan like myself. Anyone who hasn't seen Lewis's work before, he is part of the 90 Minute Cynic team, so definitely check that out. Just a couple of other comments coming in. Celtic fans, Anthony Joseph is class. Enjoy his take on stuff and his reporting. So another big up to yourself. And finally, there's a question that I think anyone who is a journalist would want to know from someone like yourself. And what is the advice you would give to someone now? Someone like Lewis, like a couple of others that are on the State of Mind team. There's Amy Canavan, there's Natasha Meikle, there's a lot of ones that are looking to get into the world of journalism. What would be the tips from yourself working at Sky to help them to develop their careers and get to the level that you're at right now?
Yeah, just one simple thing. It's work experience. Get work experience and do as much as you can. And now we're in an era and with social media and podcasts and live things like this, and like Lewis was pointing out, that he does the Cynic and people doing the State of Mind. You can create your own content. You can get a huge following. You can publishers and producers and companies will see what you're doing. You can show off your skills better than ever. Before, we used to have to phone up your local paper or national newspaper and ask for a week's work experience, and that would be your way in the door. And it's the same principle, but you can do it yourself now, and you can show off your work. You can show off your talent, and there's just so many ways of having your work published and your work out there. I would say definitely try and create some kind of hub where you have a website and do as much publishing. Get involved in a Celtic State of Mind if you're a Celtic fan, or any other publication, a Man United one, a fanzine, Aberdeen one, whatever, and just get your work published as much as you can and do as much reporting as you can, and you will get recognised, and you will have a portfolio there or a website there that when you apply for a job somewhere, or you're lucky enough to get your own business in journalism, then people can see your work and they can see everything you've done. And it's almost better now. Well, I know it's a saturated market, but it's almost better now and easier now to create your own content. And
amazingly, we've been on for over an hour now, and we're just about running out of time before the Celtic State of Mind broadcast comes up at 12:30. I will be on with Amy Canavan and Paul John Dykes as we look ahead to the game against Aberdeen this evening. We'll also be discussing the news of Liam Shaw. Is it Liam Shaw from Sheffield Wednesday signing on a pre-contract? Do you know a lot about him as a good talent to come up?
Certainly Sheffield Wednesday fans rate him highly. He hasn't played that many games. I mean, he's just burst into the team recently. Can play centre mid. Also been told he can play in defence as well. But a 19-year-old who seems like a good deal anyway. Celtic will be paying about £300,000 compensation for his development. So good bit of business, I would say. I mean, that's the kind of market Celtic have got to be looking in now because of Brexit and the difficulties. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely a good signing on paper.
And one we will be discussing about very shortly in 15 minutes' time. But from now, Anthony, I just have to thank you very much for joining us today on the Football Insomniac. I know there's been lots of questions, but we've not had time to answer them all. Where can people find you on Twitter that aren't already following you?
My Twitter handle is Anthony R. Joseph. So yeah, you can give us a follow. That'd be nice. Send an email. Colin, thanks for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great to chat with you.
It's been great, and it's been great having you on. Next week, I will be joined by Alison Conroy from Clyde Super Scoreboard. So if you have any questions for myself or for Alison, get in touch on Twitter and we'll get them asked for you. But until next week, a big thank you to Anthony, a big thank you to everyone who has been in the comment section. This has been the Football Insomniac, and until next week, take care and stay safe.